The wagon's axle groaned under the weight of 3 empty grain sacks, as Thorna Ashfeld guided the pair of exhausted mules down the dirt road toward the human settlement, her heart hammering against her ribs with a fear she refused to show on her face. She had walked for 2 days straight through territory that belonged neither to her clan nor to the humans, through the disputed borderlands where orcs were shot on sight and questions were never asked, all because her younger siblings had started looking at her with hollow eyes that said they had stopped expecting to wake up each morning. The autumn rains had failed for the 3rd year running, the game had vanished from the hills, and the human traders who used to at least negotiate with the frontier clans had stopped coming altogether after the raids farther north. Thorna was 19 winters old, small for an orc woman at barely 6 feet tall, with green skin that had gone dull from hunger and small tusks that barely protruded past her lower lip, and she knew that walking into Gideon Lennox's farmstead alone might be the last thing she ever did. But desperation had a way of making cowards brave and the sensible stupid. She had heard about the Lennox farm from an old trapper who sometimes traded with both humans and orcs, a weathered man who said that Gideon Lennox was different from the others, that he had fought in the border wars and come back changed, that he kept to himself and did not join the militia parties that hunted orcs for sport. The trapper had warned her not to get her hopes up, though, because different did not mean friendly, and a man who had killed orcs in war was not likely to help one now, no matter how pitiful her situation. But Thorna had nothing else to offer except her pride, and pride was a luxury her clan could no longer afford. The children were eating boiled leather and bark paste. The elders were giving their portions to the young. 3 infants had died in the last month. She would crawl on her belly and beg if that was what it took to get food back to her people. The farmstead appeared around a bend in the road, larger and more prosperous than she had expected, with golden fields of wheat stretching toward the tree line, and a sturdy 2-story house built from honey-colored wood. A massive barn stood behind the house, its doors open to reveal stacks of hay and grain sacks that made Thorna's empty stomach clench with longing. Chickens pecked in the yard. A cow lowed from somewhere behind the barn. Smoke rose from the chimney in a straight line toward the pale blue sky. It looked like something from a dream, like the stories the clan elders told about the days before the wars when orcs and humans had sometimes traded peacefully and children of both races had not learned to hate each other from birth. Thorna brought the wagon to a stop at the edge of the property, her hands shaking as she wrapped the reins around the brake lever and climbed down to the dusty ground. The front door of the house opened before she could take 3 steps toward it, and a man emerged with a rifle in his hands, not pointed at her but held ready across his chest in a way that said he knew exactly how to use it. Thorna froze, raising her empty hands to show she carried no weapons, though she knew that her body itself was a weapon in human eyes, that they saw her green skin and her tusks and her pointed ears, and assumed she was a monster who would tear them apart given half a chance. The man was tall even by human standards, broad across the shoulders and narrow at the waist, with brown hair that fell past his collar, and a beard that covered the lower half of his face. He wore simple farmer's clothes, homespun trousers and a linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and marked with the white lines of old scars. His eyes were gray, the color of winter clouds, and they studied her with an intensity that made her want to run. "You are on private property," he said, his voice low and rough, not hostile but not welcoming either. "Careful, wary. State your business or turn that wagon around and go back the way you came." Thorna's mouth had gone dry, and she had to swallow twice before she could speak. "I am Thorna Ashfeld of the Red Ridge clan. I have come to trade or to beg if trade is not possible. My people are starving. The children are dying. I have nothing to offer except my word that I will repay any kindness shown, but I am asking for food. Grain, dried meat, anything you can spare. I will work for it. I will do whatever you ask. The man's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes, too quick for her to read. He lowered the rifle slightly, though he did not set it down. You walked here alone? Yes, through the borderlands. Yes. You are either very brave or very stupid. He tilted his head, studying her in a way that made her feel exposed despite being fully clothed. How many in your clan? 43. 15 are children under 10 winters. 6 are elders too old to hunt or fight. The numbers came out in a rush, tumbling over each other. The hunters go out every day and come back with nothing. The streams are dry. The roots we dig are withered. We have eaten the seed grain and the leather from our tents. The clan council voted to send a delegation to the human settlements to ask for trade, but the others were afraid. I volunteered because I am the fastest runner, and because I have no children of my own to leave orphaned if I am killed. The man was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving from her face to the empty wagon and back again. Then he said, "You are Gideon Lennox." "I am." "The trapper Mikhail said you might listen. He said you were fair." "Mikhail talks too much." Gideon finally set the rifle down, leaning it against the porch railing, though he kept himself between Thorna and the door to his house. "Red Ridge Clan, you are the ones who stayed out of the northern raids." "Yes, we wanted no part of that bloodshed. We have kept to our territory and hunted only what we needed. But the other clans blame us for not joining the fight, and the humans blame us for being orcs. We are caught between two hatreds, and now we are paying the price." Thorna's voice cracked despite her best efforts to keep it steady. "I know you have no reason to help us. I know your people and mine have been enemies for generations. But I am asking anyway, because asking is all I have left." Gideon studied her for another long moment, and Thorna forced herself to meet his gaze, to let him see her desperation and her sincerity. She expected him to refuse, to tell her to leave before he called the militia, to spit at her feet and curse her for daring to come here. Instead, he turned and walked back into the house without a word, leaving the door open behind him. Thorna stood frozen in confusion, unsure whether this was dismissal or invitation, until he reappeared a moment later with a heavy coat over his shoulders and a pair of work gloves in his hands. "Bring the wagon to the barn," he said, already walking down the porch steps and past her toward the large structure behind the house. Thorna scrambled back to the wagon, her hands fumbling with the reins as she urged the tired mules forward. Her heart was racing now for a different reason, a fragile hope blooming in her chest that she did not dare to fully acknowledge. She followed Gideon to the barn, where he had already begun pulling grain sacks from the stacks along the wall. He worked with the efficient movements of someone who had done hard physical labor his entire life, slinging the heavy sacks over his shoulder and carrying them to the wagon as if they weighed nothing. "Wait," Thorna said, jumping down from the wagon seat. "What are you doing?" "Loading your wagon." Gideon did not look at her as he hefted another sack into place. "You said your people are starving. I have grain. But I have nothing to pay you with. I said I would work, that I would repay you somehow." She moved to help him, grabbing one of the sacks and nearly staggering under its weight before she managed to haul it up into the wagon bed. It was full of wheat, beautiful golden wheat that would make bread and porridge and keep her siblings alive through the winter. "I did not ask you to pay me." Gideon's voice was flat, matter of fact, as if giving away a substantial portion of his harvest to a complete stranger was the most natural thing in the world. "I did not ask you to work. I am giving you the grain because you need it." Thorna stopped moving, a grain sack clutched against her chest, and stared at him. "I do not understand." "What is there to understand?" Gideon finally looked at her, and the expression in his gray eyes was impossible to read. "You came here desperate and honest. You asked for help. I am helping. That is the end of it." "But why?" The question burst out of her before she could stop it. "Your people hate mine. You fought in the wars. You have every reason to turn me away or worse. Why would you do this?" Gideon was quiet for a moment, his jaw working beneath his beard. Then he said, "I have seen enough starvation to last a lifetime. I will not add to it if I can prevent it. Come on, keep loading. We need to get you on the road before dark if you want to make it back to safe territory by tomorrow night." They worked in silence after that, hauling sack after sack of grain into the wagon until it sat low on its axles. Gideon added dried meat wrapped in cloth, sacks of beans and lentils, a wheel of hard cheese, dried apples, salt, and even a small cask of oil. Thorna's arms burned with exertion, and tears kept blurring her vision. Tears she wiped away angrily because she had promised herself she would not cry no matter what happened. When the wagon was finally loaded, Gideon went back into the house one more time and returned with 2 heavy blankets and a leather pouch. "The blankets are for the journey," he said, tucking them into a corner of the wagon bed. "The pouch has coin. Not much, but enough to buy medicine if the children need it." Thorna took the pouch with shaking hands and then, before she could think better of it, dropped to her knees in the dirt at his feet. "I owe you a life debt. By the old laws of my people, I am bound to you until this debt is repaid. If you ever need anything, you need only ask, and I will come. I swear it on my blood and my honor. Get up." Gideon's voice was sharp, and when she looked up, she saw discomfort on his face. "I do not want a debt. I do not want you bound to me. I want you to take this food to your people and keep them alive. That is all." "Then you do not understand how this works," Thorna said, rising to her feet but not stepping back. "A life debt is not something you can refuse. You have saved my clan. That means you have saved me. I am bound whether you acknowledge it or not." Gideon opened his mouth as if to argue, then seemed to think better of it. He shook his head, a gesture that might have been frustration or resignation. "Then consider the debt paid if you make it home safely. That is all I ask." "That is not how it works." "Then we will have to disagree." He walked past her to check the wagon's wheels and the harness on the mules. "These animals are exhausted. There is a stream 2 miles back the way you came. Stop there and let them rest and drink before you push on. Do not travel after dark. The militia patrols at night, and they will not stop to ask questions before they shoot." "I know." Thorna climbed up onto the wagon seat, taking the reins in her hands. The weight of the loaded wagon felt like a miracle, like something that could not possibly be real. "Thank you. I do not have better words, but thank you." Gideon stepped back, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "Go on, then, and stay off the main roads. Keep to the farm tracks. You will be less likely to run into trouble." Thorna nodded, snapping the reins to urge the mules forward. She looked back once as the wagon rolled away from the farmstead and saw Gideon still standing there, watching her go, a solitary figure against the golden fields. She did not understand him, did not understand why he had helped her when he had every reason not to, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would repay this debt, no matter what it took, no matter how long it took. She had sworn it, and an orc's oath was binding. The journey back to Red Ridge took 3 days instead of 2, because the loaded wagon moved slowly, and because Thorna was more cautious on the return trip, taking the long way around known human settlements and traveling only during the hours when the sun was high. She saw a militia patrol once from a distance, a group of mounted men with weapons and dogs, and she hid the wagon in a stand of trees until they had passed, her heart pounding so hard she thought they might hear it from a mile away. The mules struggled with the weight, and she had to stop frequently to let them rest, sleeping in the wagon bed with one hand on a knife and her ears straining for any sound of approach. When she finally crested the ridge that overlooked her clan's settlement, she saw people moving among the skin tents, going about their daily tasks with the slow, conserving movements of those who have no energy to spare. Children sat listlessly in the dirt. Elders huddled near fire pits that burned low for lack of fuel. The settlement looked like it was dying by inches, and Thorna felt her throat close with emotion as she urged the mules down the slope toward home. The first person to notice her approach was her younger brother Kargath, a boy of 12 winters who had been practicing with a spear near the edge of the camp. He froze when he saw the loaded wagon, his mouth falling open, and then he was running and shouting, his voice carrying across the settlement. "Thorna is back! She is back and the wagon is full!" Within moments, people were pouring out of the tents, surrounding the wagon with expressions of shock and disbelief. Thorna's mother Yelena pushed through the crowd, tears already streaming down her weathered green face, and when Thorna climbed down from the wagon seat, Yelena pulled her into a crushing embrace. "We thought you were dead," her mother sobbed into her shoulder. "When you did not return after 3 days, we thought they had killed you." "I am alive," Thorna said, her own voice thick with emotion. "And I have brought food, enough to last us through the winter if we are careful." The clan elder, a grizzled orc named Thorgun who had seen more than 70 winters, approached the wagon and pulled back the canvas covering to reveal the grain sacks beneath. His scarred hands trembled as he touched the wheat, as if he could not quite believe it was real. "How?" he asked, his voice rough. "How did you get this? What did you trade?" "Nothing," Thorna said, and the words sent a ripple of confusion through the crowd. "I went to a human farmer named Gideon Lennox. I told him we were starving. He loaded the wagon and asked for nothing in return." Silence fell over the gathered orcs, a silence heavy with suspicion and disbelief. Finally, Thorgun said, "That makes no sense. Humans do not give aid freely, especially not to orcs. What is the trick? What does he want?" "I do not know," Thorna admitted. "I asked him the same thing. He said he was helping because I needed help, and that was the end of it. I swore a life debt to him, but he refused to acknowledge it. He told me to take the food and keep you all alive, and that was all he wanted. A human who asks for nothing." Her brother Kargath's voice was skeptical. "That is a story for children, not reality. And yet here is the food." Thorna gestured to the wagon. "Real and solid and enough to save us. I do not understand it either, but I am not going to question a miracle." Thorgun was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving from the wagon to Thorna's face. Then he said, "We will accept this gift because we have no choice, but we will not forget the debt, even if this human pretends it does not exist. The Red Ridge clan pays its debts. That is who we are." The rest of the day was a flurry of activity as the clan unloaded the wagon and distributed the food according to need. The children were fed first, small portions to avoid making them sick after so long with empty bellies, and Thorna watched their hollow faces brighten with something that looked like hope. Her mother made bread from the wheat, and the smell of it baking filled the settlement with a warmth that had been missing for months. People laughed for the first time in weeks. The elders sat together and made plans for rationing the supplies. Kargath wolfed down his portion so fast he made himself sick, but he did it with a grin on his face. That night, as Thorna lay in her tent with her stomach full for the first time in recent memory, she found herself thinking about Gideon Lennox. She tried to picture his face, those gray eyes that had studied her with such intensity, the way he had moved with quiet competence as he loaded the wagon, the rough timbre of his voice when he said he had seen enough starvation to last a lifetime. He was a mystery, a human who defied everything she had been taught to expect, and she found herself wanting to understand him. The life debt she had sworn was binding, yes, but more than that, she felt a pull toward him that she could not explain, a curiosity that went beyond simple gratitude. The winter came early that year, sweeping down from the northern mountains with winds that cut like knives and snow that piled in drifts against the tents. The Red Ridge clan hunkered down and survived, rationing the food Gideon had given them and supplementing it with whatever small game the hunters could find. It was not easy, and there were still hungry days, but no one died. The children grew stronger. The elders made it through the coldest months. And every day, Thorna thought about the man who had made it possible. When spring finally broke and the snow began to melt, Thorgun called a clan meeting. The gathered orcs sat around the central fire pit, wrapped in furs and blankets, their breath misting in the cold air. The elder stood and addressed them in a voice that carried across the settlement. "We survived the winter because of the generosity of a human stranger," he said. "This is not something we can ignore or forget. The Red Ridge clan does not take charity without acknowledgement. We do not leave debts unpaid. I propose that we send a delegation to this Gideon Lennox to offer our thanks properly and to ask if there is any service we can provide in return." There were murmurs of agreement from the gathered orcs, though Thorna saw wariness on many faces. Approaching humans was always dangerous, even humans who had proven themselves kind. But the elder was right. They could not simply take what they had been given and disappear. That was not the way of honor. "I will go," Thorna said, rising to her feet. "I went before. He knows my face." "It should be me." "You will not go alone this time," her mother said firmly. "I will not sit here wondering if you are dead for days on end. Take Kargath with you. He is young, but he is strong, and two are safer than one." Kargath's face lit up at the prospect of adventure, and Thorna did not have the heart to argue. In truth, she was glad for the company. The journey to Gideon's farm would be easier now that the passes were clear, but it was still a long walk through uncertain territory. They set out 3 days later, when the morning was bright and the roads were dry enough for travel. Thorna carried a pack with dried meat and trail bread, and Kargath walked beside her with a spear over his shoulder and excitement in his eyes. They made good time, covering ground quickly now that they were not burdened by a slow wagon, and they reached the borderlands by nightfall of the first day. They camped in a sheltered hollow, taking turns keeping watch, and pushed on at first light. Gideon's farmstead looked much as it had in the autumn, though now the fields were freshly plowed and the trees were beginning to bud. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Thorna could hear the sound of an axe biting into wood somewhere behind the barn. She felt an odd flutter of nervousness in her stomach as they approached, and she told herself it was simply because she was walking into human territory again, not because she was about to see Gideon Lennox. Kargath hung back as Thorna walked up to the front door and knocked, her knuckles rapping against the solid wood. The sound of the axe stopped. Footsteps approached from inside the house. The door opened, and there he was, looking exactly as she remembered, tall and broad-shouldered and watchful. His gray eyes widened slightly when he saw her, and then his gaze moved past her to Kargath, who stood at the edge of the yard with his spear held loosely at his side. "Thorna Ashfeld," Gideon said, and hearing him speak her name did something strange to her pulse. "I did not expect to see you again." "I came to thank you," Thorna said, the words tumbling out in a rush, "properly, for what you did. The food you gave us kept my clan alive through the winter. Every one of us survived. The children are healthy. The elders made it through the cold. We owe you more than I can possibly express." Gideon's expression softened slightly, though he still looked uncomfortable with the gratitude. "I am glad to hear it, truly. But I told you I did not want a debt. And I told you that is not how it works." Thorna reached into her pack and pulled out a carefully wrapped bundle. "This is for you. It is not payment, because I do not think there is any payment that would be equal to what you gave us. But it is a token of our thanks." She held out the bundle, and after a moment's hesitation, Gideon took it. He unwrapped the cloth to reveal a knife, the blade made from beautifully worked steel with a handle of carved bone. It was one of the finest pieces the clan smith had ever made, and they had all agreed that it was a worthy gift for the man who had saved them. "This is too much," Gideon said, though his fingers traced the blade with obvious appreciation. "This is craftsmanship I have rarely seen. I cannot accept this." "You can and you will," Thorna said firmly, "because if you refuse, you will insult my clan, and I do not think you want to do that. The knife is yours, Gideon Lennox. Use it well." A smile tugged at the corner of Gideon's mouth, the first she had seen from him, and it transformed his face from stern to almost handsome. "You drive a hard bargain, orc girl. I learned from the best." Thorna gestured to Kargath. "This is my brother, Kargath. I brought him so that he could see the man who saved his life. He wanted to meet you." Kargath approached slowly, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and nervousness. He stopped a few feet away and bowed in the formal orcish manner, pressing his fist to his chest. "I owe you my life, Gideon Lennox of the humans. I will not forget." Gideon looked taken aback by the formality, but he inclined his head in return. "You owe me nothing, boy. I am just glad you are well." They stood there for a moment in awkward silence, and then Gideon seemed to come to a decision. "Have you eaten? I was about to make lunch. It is not much, but you are welcome to join me." Thorna felt her heart skip in her chest. She had expected to deliver the gift and leave, not to be invited into his home. "We would not want to impose. It is not an imposition if I am offering." Gideon stepped back, holding the door open. "Come in, both of you." The inside of the house was simple but well kept, with sturdy furniture and a stone fireplace that dominated one wall. The main room served as both kitchen and living space, with a table and chairs near the hearth and shelves lined with jars of preserved food. It smelled like wood smoke and bread, and something earthy that Thorna could not quite identify. Gideon gestured for them to sit at the table while he busied himself at the fireplace, pulling out a pot and ladling soup into wooden bowls. "You live here alone?" Thorna asked, looking around the space. It was clearly a home meant for a family, with more beds visible through a doorway and space that seemed too large for one man. "I do now," Gideon said, his voice carefully neutral. "My parents built this house. They died 5 years ago within a month of each other. My sister married and moved south. It is just me and the farm now. That must be lonely. Sometimes." He brought the bowls to the table along with a loaf of bread and a crock of butter, "but I am used to it." The soup was simple but good, thick with vegetables and barley, and they ate in silence for a few minutes before Kargath, emboldened by the food and the warmth, asked, "Why did you help us? The other orcs say that humans would rather see us all dead than give us a scrap of bread. But you gave us a whole wagon of food." Gideon set down his spoon and looked at the boy for a long moment. "I fought in the border wars," he said finally. "I was 17 when I enlisted, full of pride and anger and certainty that I was doing the right thing. I fought for 3 years. I killed orcs in battle. I saw my friends die. And then, toward the end, I was part of a unit that was sent to clear out an orc settlement that was supposedly harboring raiders. He paused, his jaw tightening, and Thorna saw pain flicker across his face. It was not a raider camp. It was just a village. Families, children, elders. They had nothing to do with the attacks, but we did not know that until it was too late. I will not go into the details, but suffice it to say that I saw things that night that changed me. I came home and I swore I would never again be part of causing that kind of suffering. So when you showed up at my door, desperate and honest, asking for help to keep your people alive, I did not see an orc. I saw someone in need, and I helped. That is all. The room was very quiet. Kargath was staring at Gideon with wide eyes, and Thorna felt tears prickling at the corners of her own eyes. She understood now, in a way she had not before, why he had given so freely. He was trying to atone for something, trying to balance the scales in whatever small way he could. "Thank you for telling us," she said softly. "That could not have been easy to speak about." It was not. Gideon picked up his spoon again, his movements a little too deliberate. "But you deserve to know. You have been honest with me. I owe you the same courtesy." They finished the meal in a more companionable silence, and afterward, Gideon took them on a brief tour of the farm, showing them the fields and the barn and the vegetable garden he was preparing for planting. Kargath peppered him with questions about human farming techniques, and Gideon answered patiently, even offering advice on how the clan might improve their own crop yields. Thorna watched them interact and felt something warm and unfamiliar settle in her chest. Gideon Lennox was a good man, she realized. Not perfect, not without his ghosts, but genuinely good in a way that was rare in any species. When the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Thorna knew they needed to leave if they wanted to make camp before dark. She and Kargath said their goodbyes, and Gideon walked them to the edge of his property, the knife they had given him tucked into his belt. "Will you come back?" he asked as they prepared to leave, and there was something in his voice that made Thorna's breath catch. "You want me to?" I would not object to it. The corner of his mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. "It is good to have visitors, and I would like to know how your clan fares." "Then I will come back," Thorna promised. "When summer comes and the roads are fully clear, I will visit again." "I will look forward to it." Gideon raised a hand in farewell, and Thorna found herself memorizing the sight of him, standing there in the golden light of the setting sun, solid and steady, and somehow already important to her in a way she did not fully understand. The journey home was uneventful, and when Thorna told the clan about their visit, about the meal Gideon had shared with them, and the story he had told, she saw the wariness in their eyes begin to soften. An orc who had been wronged and still chose kindness was rare. A human who had seen the worst of war and still chose generosity was even rarer. Gideon Lennox was earning the respect of the Red Ridge clan, one small gesture at a time. Spring turned to summer, and the clan's fortunes began to improve. The spring rains came heavy and frequent, turning the hills green and bringing the game back in numbers they had not seen in years. The hunters returned with deer and wild boar. The gatherers found mushrooms and berries in abundance. The crops the clan had planted grew strong and tall. It was as if the land itself was rewarding them for surviving the lean years, and for the first time in a long time, there was laughter and lightness in the settlement. Thorna found excuses to return to Gideon's farm every few weeks. Sometimes she brought gifts from the clan, smoked meat, woven baskets, leather goods crafted by the clan's artisans. Sometimes she brought nothing but herself and her company. Gideon always welcomed her, and their visits settled into a comfortable pattern. They would share a meal, and then Thorna would help him with whatever work needed doing on the farm, hauling water or mending fences or weeding the garden. They talked as they worked, long, rambling conversations about everything and nothing, and Thorna found herself opening up to him in ways she never had with anyone else. She learned that Gideon liked to read, that his house was full of books salvaged from his parents' collection, and that he often sat up late into the night devouring stories of faraway places. She learned that he had wanted to be a scholar before the war, that he had dreams of studying history and languages, but that those dreams had died in the mud and blood of the borderlands. She learned that he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh, and that he was more lonely than he let on, even though he was too proud to admit it. In turn, she told him about her own dreams, about how she wanted to be a leader for her clan one day, someone who could navigate the dangerous politics of the frontier and keep her people safe. She told him about her fears, about how she sometimes woke up in the middle of the night convinced that the starvation would return, that the fragile peace they had found would shatter. She told him about her siblings and her mother, about the pressure she felt to be strong for them, and about how exhausting it was to never let her guard down. Gideon listened to all of it with a quiet intensity that made her feel heard in a way she had never experienced before. He did not offer empty platitudes or try to fix her problems. He just listened, and sometimes that was more valuable than anything else. As the summer deepened, Thorna began to notice things about Gideon that had nothing to do with gratitude or friendship. She noticed the way his hands moved when he worked, capable and sure. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and how rare and precious those smiles were. She noticed the way her heart sped up when she saw him, and how the days between visits felt longer than they should. She was falling for him, she realized with a mixture of wonder and fear, falling for a human man in a world that would see their connection as an abomination. She did not know if he felt the same way. Gideon was careful with his emotions, guarded in a way that suggested he had been hurt before, and was not eager to repeat the experience. But sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression she could not quite read, something soft and searching that made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, she was not alone in what she was feeling. The moment that changed everything came in late summer, on a day when Thorna had walked to the farm to help Gideon with the wheat harvest. They had been working since dawn, cutting and bundling the golden stalks under a sun that beat down like a hammer. By midday, they were both exhausted and sweating, and Gideon suggested they take a break by the creek that ran through his property. They sat on the bank with their feet in the cool water, passing a canteen back and forth and catching their breath. The creek babbled over smooth stones and dragonflies darted through the air above the water. It was peaceful, almost idyllic, and Thorna found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did. "Can I ask you something personal?" Gideon said after a long silence. "You can ask," Thorna replied, a little wary. "I may not answer, but you can ask. Why do you keep coming back here?" His gray eyes were serious as they met hers. "You have thanked me. The debt, whether I acknowledge it or not, has been more than repaid with the gifts your clan has sent. You do not owe me your time or your labor. So why do you keep returning?" Thorna's heart hammered in her chest. This was the question she had been avoiding, the truth she had not let herself fully examine. But sitting there with him, with the sun warm on her skin and the water cool around her feet, she found she did not want to lie or deflect. "Because I enjoy your company," she said quietly. "Because you make me feel like I am more than just the strong one, the brave one, the one who has to hold everything together. Because when I am with you, I can breathe, and because—" She hesitated, gathering her courage. "Because I think about you when I am not here, more than I should. More than is probably wise." Gideon was very still, his gaze locked on hers. Then he said, "If you are unwise, then so am I. I look for you every few days, watching the road and hoping you will appear. I have started planning things I want to tell you, things I want to show you. I find myself smiling for no reason, except that I am thinking about something you said. Thorna, I do not know what this is or where it can go, but I know that I look forward to your visits more than anything else in my life." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and danger. Thorna felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that one more step would send her tumbling into the unknown. She took a breath, and then she took that step. "I care about you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "More than I should, more than is safe. I know our peoples are enemies. I know that what I feel is forbidden, but I cannot help it. When I am with you, everything else falls away, and all I can think is that I do not want to be anywhere else." Gideon reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused from work, and his fingers folded around hers with a gentleness that made her throat tight. "I care about you too," he said, "and I do not give a damn what anyone else thinks about it." They sat there by the creek, holding hands like children, and Thorna felt tears slide down her cheeks. She was terrified and exhilarated in equal measure, aware that they were stepping into territory that could get them both killed, but unable to turn back. Gideon lifted his free hand and wiped away her tears with his thumb, his touch feather light against her green skin. "We will figure this out," he said, and the certainty in his voice made her believe him. "I do not know how, but we will." After that day, the nature of Thorna's visits changed. They were still careful, still cautious about being seen together, but the unspoken thing between them had become spoken, and that made all the difference. They stole moments when they could. A kiss behind the barn when she was leaving, his arm around her shoulders as they sat by the fire in the evening, her hand resting on his as they shared a meal. They talked about the future in careful, hypothetical terms, dancing around the question of what a life together might look like, but not quite daring to make concrete plans. The problem was that their world did not allow for what they wanted. Thorna could not leave her clan without being branded an exile, and Gideon could not abandon his farm, the only home he had left. The humans in the surrounding settlements would riot if they knew one of their own was involved with an orc, and the other orc clans would see the Red Ridge clan as traitors if they found out about Thorna's relationship. They were trapped by circumstances larger than themselves, two people trying to carve out happiness in a world determined to deny it to them. The crisis came in early autumn, when the leaves were just beginning to turn, and the air held the first bite of approaching winter. Thorna had been at Gideon's farm for the afternoon, helping him prepare the root cellar for the harvest, when they heard the sound of horses approaching on the road. They both froze, and Gideon's hand went instinctively to the knife at his belt, the knife Thorna had given him. "Stay inside," he said, already moving toward the door. "Do not let them see you." Thorna wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. If the riders were human militia, her presence would put Gideon in immediate danger. She slipped into the back room and pressed herself against the wall beside the window, where she could peek out without being seen. The riders were indeed militia, 6 men on horseback with weapons and hard faces. They pulled up in front of the house, and the leader, a grizzled man with a scar across his jaw, dismounted and approached the porch where Gideon stood. "Gideon Lennox," the man said, his voice carrying across the yard. "We need to have a word with you." "Captain Barrett," Gideon replied, his tone neutral. "What brings the militia to my farm?" "We have had reports," Barrett said, "of someone in this area providing aid and comfort to orcs. Food, supplies, that sort of thing. You would not know anything about that, would you?" Thorna's blood ran cold. Someone had seen her visiting or had noticed the gifts the clan had sent and had reported it to the militia. This was exactly the scenario she had feared, and now Gideon was going to pay the price for his kindness. "I run a farm," Gideon said calmly. "Sometimes I trade with the trappers who come through, and I do not always ask where they come from or who they might know. If some of my grain ended up with orcs, it was not by my direct hand." It was a careful answer, technically true but evasive, and Barrett's eyes narrowed. "Do not play games with me, Lennox. We know you gave aid to the Red Ridge clan last winter. A full wagon of supplies, by the accounts we have heard. That is not trading with trappers. That is outright collaboration with the enemy." "The Red Ridge clan stayed out of the northern raids," Gideon said, his voice hardening. "They are not the enemy. They are people trying to survive just like the rest of us. And yes, I gave them food because they were starving and I had extra. I would do it again." "Then you are a traitor." Barrett's hand moved to the pistol at his hip. "By the authority of the frontier militia, I am placing you under arrest for aiding and abetting the enemy. You will come with us to stand trial." "On what charges exactly?" Gideon's stance had shifted, subtle but unmistakable, into something more ready for combat. "There is no law that forbids trade with peaceful orcs. You are making this up as you go, Barrett." "The law is what we say it is out here," Barrett snapped. "Now are you coming peacefully, or do we have to drag you?" Thorna could not stand by and listen any longer. She burst out of the house, moving so fast that she was beside Gideon before any of the militia could react. The men shouted and reached for their weapons, but she held up her empty hands, making no threatening moves. "Wait," she said, her voice ringing out across the yard. "If you want to arrest someone for collaboration, arrest me. I am Thorna Ashfeld of the Red Ridge clan. I came here asking for help." Gideon Lennox gave it because he is a good man with a conscience. He has committed no crime except refusing to let people starve. If that makes him a traitor in your eyes, then your laws are worth less than dirt. Barrett's face flushed red with anger. "An orc, on human land. That alone is enough to justify killing you where you stand." "Then do it," Thorna said, stepping forward and spreading her arms. "Shoot me. But if you do, you will have to live with the knowledge that you murdered an unarmed woman who was guilty of nothing except asking for food." "Is that the kind of man you are, Captain Barrett?" The militia men looked uncertain now, their weapons half raised but not quite pointing at her. Killing an orc in battle was one thing. Executing one in cold blood while she stood there defiant and unafraid was another. Barrett seemed to be struggling with the same calculation, his hand twitching on his pistol but not drawing it. "You have a lot of nerve, orc," he said finally. "But nerve will not save you or your human friend. You are both coming with us." "No." Gideon's voice was flat and hard. "You are not taking her anywhere. If you want to arrest me, fine. I will come with you, but she walks away free and unmolested. That is my condition." "You do not get to make conditions," Barrett snarled. "Then you do not get me peacefully." Gideon's hand was on his knife now, and the other militiamen shifted uneasily. They knew his reputation as a veteran, knew that he was dangerous, even outnumbered. "I fought in the border wars, Barrett. I have killed men before, and I will do it again if you force my hand. Let her go, and I will come with you quietly. Otherwise, this gets bloody, and I promise you I will not be the only casualty." The standoff stretched for a long, tense moment. Thorna wanted to scream at Gideon not to sacrifice himself for her, but she also knew that arguing would only make things worse. Finally, Barrett spat into the dirt and said, "Fine. The orc walks, but you are coming with us, Lennox, and if you resist, we will shoot you where you stand." "Understood." Gideon looked at Thorna, and in his eyes she saw sadness and determination and something that looked like love. "Go home, Thorna. Tell your clan what happened. Do not try to follow us. Do not do anything stupid. Promise me." "I cannot promise that," Thorna said, her voice breaking. "I cannot just let them take you. You can and you will." He reached out and squeezed her hand quick and hard. "Trust me, I will be all right. This is not the end." Before she could respond, two of the militiamen had dismounted and grabbed Gideon's arms, pulling them behind his back and binding his wrists with rope. They hoisted him onto one of the horses, and Barrett remounted his own animal, looking down at Thorna with contempt. "Count yourself lucky, Orc," he said. "And if I ever see you on human land again, luck will not save you." They rode off, taking Gideon with them, and Thorna stood frozen in the yard, her hands clenched into fists and tears streaming down her face. She had brought this on him. Her visits, her affection, her inability to stay away had painted a target on his back, and now he was going to suffer for it. The thought was unbearable, a physical pain that made her want to double over and howl, but she did not have time to wallow. If Gideon was going to stand trial, she needed to act fast. She needed allies, information, and a plan. She forced herself to move, to start running back toward the clan settlement, her mind already racing ahead to what needed to happen next. When she reached Red Ridge, she went straight to Thorgun's tent and told him everything, the words pouring out in a torrent. She told him about her visits to Gideon's farm, about the connection that had grown between them, and about the militia's arrest. She waited for Thorgun to be angry, to call her a fool for risking the clan's safety, but instead the old orc simply nodded, his expression grim. "I suspected something of the sort," he said. "You have been different these past months, lighter, happier. I am glad you found someone who makes you feel that way, even if the circumstances are less than ideal." "He is going to be punished because of me," Thorna said, her voice raw. "They are going to put him on trial for helping us, for helping me. I cannot let that stand." "No," Thorgun agreed. "You cannot. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Thorna took a breath, and then she said, "I am going to testify on his behalf. I am going to walk into that human settlement and tell them exactly what happened, and I am going to make them see that he did nothing wrong." "They will never let you into the trial," Thorgun pointed out. "And even if they do, they will not listen to an orc. You will be throwing your life away for nothing." "Then I will throw my life away." Thorna's voice was fierce. "I owe him that much. I owe him everything." Thorgun studied her for a long moment, and then he sighed. "You are brave and foolish in equal measure, child. Very well. If you are determined to do this, then you will not do it alone. The clan will support you. We will send a delegation. We will make sure the humans understand that Gideon Lennox acted with honor, and that we consider him a friend of the Red Ridge clan. It may not save him, but at least he will know he is not abandoned." Thorna felt a surge of gratitude so intense it brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Thank you, Elder. I will not forget this. See that you do not." Thorgun rose to his feet, his old joints creaking. "Now go. Rest. We leave at dawn." The next morning, a group of 10 orcs set out for the human settlement where Gideon was being held. Thorgun led them, with Thorna at his side and 8 of the clan's strongest warriors behind them. It was a risk, bringing armed orcs into human territory, but Thorgun insisted that they would not go begging. They would go as equals, with dignity and strength, and let the humans make of it what they would. The settlement was a rough frontier town, little more than a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a central square. The humans who saw them approaching shouted warnings and grabbed for weapons, but Thorgun raised his hand in a gesture of peace and called out in a voice that carried across the square. "We come to speak at the trial of Gideon Lennox. We are the Red Ridge clan, and he is a friend to our people. We demand the right to testify on his behalf." There was a flurry of activity as the town officials scrambled to respond to this unprecedented situation. Orcs did not walk boldly into human settlements. Orcs did not demand anything. The fact that they were doing so now, calmly and without aggression, seemed to throw the humans into confusion. Finally, an older man in a formal coat emerged from one of the larger buildings, flanked by guards. He had the look of a magistrate or mayor, someone used to authority, and he studied the orcs with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. "I am Magistrate Aldridge," he said. "This is highly irregular. Orcs are not permitted to testify in human courts." "Then change your laws," Thorgun said bluntly. "Or at least make an exception. Gideon Lennox stands accused of aiding our clan. We are here to provide context for his actions. If you want the full truth, you will hear what we have to say." Aldridge hesitated, clearly torn. On one hand, allowing orcs to participate in a trial was unthinkable. On the other hand, refusing them might provoke an incident that could escalate into violence, and the town was not equipped to fight off a determined orc warband. Finally, he said, "Very well. You may observe the trial. If the opportunity arises, you may speak. But you will be unarmed and you will behave with decorum, or you will be removed by force. Is that understood?" "Understood," Thorgun agreed, and he gestured for the warriors to leave their weapons outside the building. They did so reluctantly, and then the clan delegation was ushered into the hall where the trial was to take place. The room was packed with humans, all of them glaring at the orcs with open hostility. Thorna kept her head high and her expression calm, refusing to be intimidated. She scanned the room until she found Gideon, sitting at a table near the front with his hands bound and his face carefully blank. When their eyes met, she saw relief and fear flash across his features, and she tried to convey with her gaze that she was not going anywhere. The trial began, and it quickly became clear that it was less about justice and more about punishment. Barrett testified about Gideon's collaboration with the orcs, painting him as a traitor who had given aid to the enemy during a time of war. Other witnesses spoke of seeing Thorna at the farm, of the gifts that had been delivered, of Gideon's refusal to participate in militia actions. The prosecutor, a slick-looking man with cold eyes, argued that Gideon had betrayed his own people and should be punished accordingly. When it was Gideon's turn to speak, he stood and addressed the court with quiet dignity. "I gave food to starving people," he said. "That is my crime. The Red Ridge clan had nothing to do with the northern raids. They were caught between two fires, blamed by humans for being orcs and blamed by other orcs for refusing to fight. They were dying, and I had the means to help them. So I did. If that makes me a traitor, then I am proud to be one. Because I would rather be a traitor with a clear conscience than a loyal citizen who lets children starve." His words sent a murmur through the crowd, some angry and some thoughtful. Then Magistrate Aldridge looked at Thorgun and said, "You wish to speak on behalf of the defendant. Now is your opportunity." Thorgun rose to his feet, his presence commanding despite his age. "I am Thorgun, elder of the Red Ridge clan. I speak for my people when I say that Gideon Lennox saved our lives. We were starving. Our children were dying. Thorna Ashfeld, one of our bravest, walked into his territory alone and unarmed to beg for help. He could have killed her. He could have turned her away. Instead, he loaded a wagon with food and asked for nothing in return. He showed us mercy when we had no right to expect it, and because of him, every member of our clan survived the winter. He is not a traitor. He is a hero. And if your laws say otherwise, then your laws are broken." The room erupted in shouts and arguments, humans yelling at Thorgun and each other. Aldridge had to call for order multiple times before the noise died down. Then he looked at Thorna and said, "And you? Do you wish to speak as well?" Thorna stood, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "I am Thorna Ashfeld," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I am the one who went to Gideon Lennox and asked for help. Everything that happened is my doing. If you want to punish someone, punish me. He acted out of compassion, and I will not stand by and watch him be destroyed for it." She took a breath, and then she decided to lay all her cards on the table. "I love him," she said, and the room went silent. "I know that is forbidden. I know that our peoples are enemies, but I do not care. Gideon Lennox is the best man I have ever known, human or orc, and if you condemn him for his kindness, then you are condemning the very thing that makes us better than animals. He saved my clan, and in doing so, he saved me. I owe him everything, and I will spend the rest of my life repaying that debt if he will let me." The silence that followed was deafening. Thorna sat back down, her hands shaking, and Gideon was staring at her with an expression of wonder and disbelief. Aldridge looked like he had been struck by lightning, clearly having no idea how to respond to such a public declaration. Finally, the magistrate called for a recess, and the court was cleared while the officials deliberated. Thorna and the clan delegation were escorted outside, and they waited in the square, tense and watchful. Hours passed. The sun climbed high and began to descend toward the horizon. Thorna paced like a caged animal, unable to sit still, while Thorgun watched her with quiet sympathy. When they were finally called back inside, Aldridge looked exhausted. He stood and addressed the court, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision. "This is not a straightforward case," he said. "Gideon Lennox acted in defiance of custom and expectation, but not in clear violation of any law. The Red Ridge clan has presented evidence that they were in desperate need, and that Lennox's aid was given freely, and without expectation of gain. Furthermore, the clan has demonstrated today that they are capable of reason and honor, qualities we do not often associate with orcs." He paused, looking at Gideon. "I cannot in good conscience punish a man for acting on his compassion, even if that compassion was directed toward those we consider enemies. Therefore, I am dismissing the charges. Gideon Lennox, you are free to go. However, I must warn you that this decision will not be popular, and you may face repercussions from your neighbors. I suggest you tread carefully in the future." Thorna felt her knees go weak with relief. Gideon was being released. He was going to be all right. She watched as the guards cut the ropes binding his wrists, and then he was walking toward her, and she was running to meet him. They collided in the middle of the room, and she threw her arms around him, not caring who was watching or what they thought. "You fool," she whispered into his shoulder. "You beautiful, stubborn fool, you could have died." "So could you," he murmured back, his arms tight around her. "Walking in here and declaring your love in front of everyone. That was the bravest and most reckless thing I have ever seen. I meant every word. I know." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his gray eyes shining. "I love you too, Thorna Ashfeld. I have for a long time. I was just too afraid to say it." They stood there in the middle of the courtroom holding each other, and for a moment the rest of the world fell away. Then Thorgun cleared his throat, and reality came crashing back. They pulled apart, both of them a little embarrassed, and followed the clan delegation out into the square. The humans of the town watched them leave with expressions ranging from shock to disgust to grudging respect. Thorna knew that this was not the end of their troubles, that they would face opposition and danger for as long as they tried to be together, but she also knew that she did not care. They had faced down a trial and won. They had declared their feelings in the most public way possible. There was no going back now. They walked together back toward the borderlands, the clan delegation providing a protective escort. When they reached the point where the clan would turn toward Red Ridge and Gideon would continue to his farm, Thorgun pulled them aside. "You have made your choice," he said. "Both of you. You have chosen each other over the easy path, and that is brave, but you need to understand that this will not get easier. The humans will not accept an orc in their midst, and the other orc clans will not accept a human. You will be outsiders wherever you go." "I know," Thorna said. "Then here is what I propose." Thorgun looked between them, his expression serious. "Gideon Lennox, you are welcome in the Red Ridge clan. If you wish to leave your farm and join us, we will accept you as one of our own. You have earned that right through your actions. Alternatively, Thorna can remain with you on human lands, but she will always be at risk. The choice is yours, but it must be made together." Gideon was quiet for a long moment, and Thorna could see him thinking, weighing the options. Finally, he said, "I appreciate the offer, Elder, truly. But I cannot abandon my farm. It is all I have left of my family, and it is my livelihood. However, I have a counter-proposal. What if there was a way for both our peoples to benefit? What if we established a formal trade relationship between the Red Ridge clan and my farm, and eventually with other sympathetic humans? Food and goods exchanged freely. No more starvation. No more isolation. It would not be easy, and it would take time to build trust, but it might be a start toward something better." Thorgun's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "You are suggesting we turn this personal connection into something larger, a bridge between our peoples." "Exactly." Gideon's voice was gaining confidence now. "We have already proven it can work on a small scale. Why not try to expand it? Thorna and I can be the mediators, the ones who facilitate trade and communication. It will not solve all the problems, but it is a better solution than us simply hiding and hoping no one notices." Thorna felt a surge of excitement at the idea. It was ambitious, maybe even foolish, but it was also exactly the kind of thing that could change the frontier. "I support this," she said. "If we are going to be together, we should use that to build something good, something that helps both our peoples." Thorgun considered for a long moment, and then he nodded slowly. "Very well, we will try this experiment. But understand that it will be dangerous, and there will be those on both sides who will try to stop you. You will need to be clever and careful, and you will need to prove that this arrangement benefits everyone involved." "We will," Thorna promised. "You have my word." They spent the rest of the day working out the details of the arrangement. Gideon would continue to farm his land, and Thorna would split her time between the clan and the farm, acting as a liaison. The clan would provide labor during harvest season and hunters to supplement Gideon's food supplies. In return, Gideon would share a portion of his crop yield and provide access to trade goods that the clan could not otherwise obtain. It was a partnership built on mutual benefit and trust, and while it was fragile, it was real. Over the following months, the arrangement began to take shape. Thorna moved between the two worlds, spending several days at a time with Gideon, and then returning to the clan to report on progress and coordinate efforts. It was exhausting, and there were moments when she wondered if they were trying to do the impossible, but there were also moments of genuine hope. The first time a group of clan hunters arrived at Gideon's farm to help with the wheat harvest and worked side by side with a human farmer, she felt like they were witnessing something historic. The first time Gideon visited the clan settlement and was greeted with respect rather than suspicion, she knew they were making progress. Not everyone was happy with the arrangement. Some of the humans in the surrounding settlements grumbled about Gideon's orc sympathies, and a few even tried to sabotage his farm by burning a field or letting his animals loose. The clan dealt with those incidents swiftly, sending warriors to patrol the area and make it clear that anyone who threatened Gideon would answer to the Red Ridge clan. Similarly, some of the other orc clans saw the Red Ridge clan's alliance with a human as weakness or betrayal, and there were tense encounters when rival clans tried to intimidate them into breaking the arrangement. But Thorgun stood firm and the clan backed him, and slowly, grudgingly, the opposition began to quiet through it all. Thorna and Gideon's relationship deepened and solidified. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, the small things that made them individuals rather than representatives of their species. Thorna learned that Gideon liked to wake before dawn and watch the sunrise with a cup of tea in his hands. Gideon learned that Thorna sang when she worked, old orc ballads that were both mournful and beautiful. They had their first real argument over something trivial, how to store the root vegetables in the cellar, and learned that they could disagree without the relationship falling apart. They celebrated small victories together, like the first successful trade with another human farmer, and consoled each other through setbacks, like the time a militia patrol tried to arrest Thorna and Gideon had to talk them down. As winter approached again, Thorna found herself thinking about the future in concrete terms rather than vague hypotheticals. She wanted to spend her life with Gideon, wanted to build something permanent with him, but she did not know how to make that happen in a world that did not accommodate their kind of love. She was mulling over this problem one evening as they sat by the fire in Gideon's house, the wind howling outside and snow beginning to fall. "What are you thinking about?" Gideon asked, looking up from the book he had been reading. "The future," Thorna admitted. "What happens next for us? We have built this arrangement between the clan and your farm, and that is good, but I want more than just a working partnership. I want a life with you, Gideon. A real life, not just stolen moments in between everything else." Gideon set down his book and reached for her hand. "I want that too. More than anything. I have been thinking about it as well, actually, and I have an idea, though it might sound crazy. Tell me, what if we formalized our commitment, not a human marriage or an orc bonding, but something that honors both our traditions? A ceremony that acknowledges what we are to each other, witnessed by both our peoples. It would be a statement, a way of saying that we refuse to be divided by the prejudices of others." Thorna felt her heart leap. The idea was audacious, maybe even dangerous, but it was also perfect. "You want to marry me?" "I do." Gideon's voice was steady, but she could see the nervousness in his eyes. "If you will have me, I know it will not be easy, and I know we will face opposition, but I do not want to spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been. I want to spend it with you building a future that our people said was impossible." Thorna kissed him then, hard and fierce, pouring all her love and hope into the gesture. When they finally pulled apart, she was grinning. "Yes, 1,000 times yes. Let us get married and scandalize everyone who thinks we should not exist." They spent the next few weeks planning the ceremony, working with Thorgun and a sympathetic human priest named Father Donovan, whom Gideon had known since childhood. It was a delicate balancing act, blending human and orc traditions in a way that felt respectful to both, but they managed it. The ceremony would take place at the border between Gideon's farm and the clan's territory, a symbolic location that represented the bridge they were building between their peoples. There would be witnesses from both sides, and the vows would be spoken in both human and orcish languages. When the day arrived, it was cold and clear, the sky a brilliant blue and the snow crunching underfoot. Thorna wore a dress made by the clan's weavers, green and gold fabric that complemented her skin, and a crown of winter berries in her dark hair. Gideon wore his best clothes, simple but well made, and the knife she had given him on his belt. They stood together at the border, facing each other while their peoples gathered in a loose circle around them. Father Donovan spoke first, blessing the union in the name of the human god. And then Thorgun performed the orcish bonding rite, binding their hands together with a braided cord and speaking the ancient words that sealed their commitment. When it was time for vows, Thorna spoke first, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. I vow to stand beside you through all the seasons of our lives, through hardship and plenty, through conflict and peace. I vow to honor your courage and your compassion, the things that make you the man I love. I vow to build a future with you that our children and our children's children will be proud of. I am yours, Gideon Lennox, from this day until my last. Gideon's eyes were bright with unshed tears as he spoke his own vows. I vow to love you without reservation, without hesitation, without fear of what the world will say. I vow to be your partner and your protector, your friend and your home. I vow to work every day to be worthy of the faith you have placed in me. I am yours, Thorna Ashfeld, from this day until my last. They sealed the vows with a kiss, and the gathered crowd erupted in cheers and applause, humans and orcs alike celebrating something that had seemed impossible just a year ago. It was not perfect, and Thorna knew that their struggles were far from over. But in that moment, surrounded by people who had chosen to support them, she felt a joy so intense it was almost overwhelming. The celebration that followed was a raucous affair, with food and drink shared freely between the two groups. Thorna watched as humans and orcs who had been enemies their entire lives sat together and talked, tentatively at first but with growing ease. She saw Kargath arm wrestling with one of the human farmers, both of them laughing. She saw her mother sharing recipes with a human woman. She saw Thorgun and Father Donovan deep in conversation about philosophy and theology. It was a small thing, just one evening of peace, but it felt like the beginning of something important. As the night wore on and the celebration began to wind down, Gideon pulled Thorna aside, away from the crowd. They walked together through the snowy fields, their breath misting in the cold air, until they reached a small rise where they could look out over the land. "We did it," Gideon said quietly. "We actually did it." "We did," Thorna agreed, leaning against him. "Though I have a feeling the hard part is just beginning. Probably." He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "But we will face it together. That makes all the difference." They stood there in silence for a while, watching the stars come out one by one in the darkening sky. Thorna thought about everything that had led to this moment, from her desperate walk to Gideon's farm to their trial to the ceremony they had just completed. It had been a journey filled with fear and uncertainty, but also with hope and love, and she would not trade it for anything. "What do you think happens next?" she asked eventually. "I do not know," Gideon admitted, "but I think we keep doing what we have been doing, building bridges, proving that humans and orcs can live in peace, raising a family if we are lucky. Making a life that is ours, not defined by what others expect from us. A family." Thorna felt a flutter of excitement at the thought. She had not let herself think that far ahead, had not dared to hope that they could have children together, but now that Gideon had said it out loud, she realized how much she wanted it. "Do you think that is possible? I do not know if humans and orcs can even have children together." "Only one way to find out," Gideon said with a grin, and Thorna laughed, swatting him lightly on the arm. "You are terrible." "You love me anyway." "I do," she agreed, turning to face him fully. "I really do." They kissed again, slower this time, savoring the moment. When they finally headed back to the celebration, hand in hand, Thorna felt a sense of peace she had never experienced before. She did not know what the future held, but she knew that whatever came, they would face it together. And that was enough. The months that followed their wedding were among the happiest of Thorna's life, despite the challenges they faced. She moved into Gideon's house permanently, though she still traveled to the clan settlement regularly to maintain the trade relationship and stay connected to her family. Gideon worked his farm with her help, and they slowly expanded their operations, planting more fields and acquiring more livestock. The trade arrangement with the Red Ridge clan flourished, and soon other sympathetic humans were asking to be included, curious about this unprecedented partnership between species. In the spring, Thorna discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a mixture of joy and terror, because she had no idea what to expect from a half-human, half-orc pregnancy. Gideon was equally thrilled and nervous, and they spent hours talking about what kind of parents they wanted to be, and how they would raise a child in a world that might not accept them. Thorna's mother came to stay with them for the final months of the pregnancy, and her presence was a comfort during the uncertain times. When their daughter was born on a warm summer evening, Thorna wept with relief and wonder. The baby was healthy and strong, with green-tinged skin that was lighter than Thorna's but darker than Gideon's, and tiny nubs where tusks would eventually grow. She had Gideon's gray eyes and Thorna's pointed ears, a perfect blend of both her parents. They named her Alara, a name that worked in both human and orcish languages, and vowed to raise her to be proud of both her heritages. Alara's birth was a turning point for the community. She was proof that humans and orcs could create life together, that their peoples were not as different as everyone had believed. Thorna watched as the humans and orcs who had been skeptical of the arrangement softened when they saw the baby, as if her very existence challenged their prejudices in a way that words never could. As Alara grew, so did the community around her. More humans and orcs began to interact, drawn by the success of the trade relationship and by the example that Thorna and Gideon had set. A few other mixed couples formed, tentatively at first but with growing confidence. The Red Ridge clan became known as a place of tolerance and innovation, and Gideon's farm became a neutral meeting ground where both peoples could come together in peace. There were still difficulties, of course. Militia patrols occasionally harassed travelers on their way to the farm, and rival orc clans sometimes tried to intimidate the Red Ridge clan into abandoning their human alliances. But each time trouble arose, the community came together to face it, humans and orcs standing side by side in defense of what they had built. It was not perfect, and it was not easy, but it was real and it was growing. One autumn afternoon, when Alara was 3 years old and running around the farmyard with the energy of a small tornado, Thorna stood on the porch and watched her play. Gideon came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we have come," Thorna said, leaning back into his embrace. "About how that day I walked to your farm I was expecting to die, and instead I found you. I found a future I never imagined was possible." "I am glad you were brave enough to come," Gideon murmured. "I am glad you gave me the chance to be better than I was. You changed my life, Thorna. You gave me purpose and hope and love. I do not know what I did to deserve you, but I am grateful every single day." "You loaded the wagon and asked nothing," Thorna said softly. "That is what you did. You showed compassion when you had every reason not to. You took a risk on a desperate orc girl, and you changed the world because of it. We changed the world together." They stood there together, watching their daughter play in the golden light of the setting sun, and Thorna felt a contentment so profound, it brought tears to her eyes. The road had been long and difficult, and there were still challenges ahead, but they had built something beautiful out of desperation and hope. They had proven that love could bridge even the deepest divides, that kindness could change hearts, and that a future of peace was possible if people were brave enough to fight for it. Years later, when Alara was grown and had children of her own, when the trade network between humans and orcs had expanded across the entire frontier, when the story of Thorna and Gideon had become legend, people would ask how it all started. And the answer was always the same. It started with a wagon full of grain, given freely by a man who asked nothing in return, and with an orc woman brave enough to accept that gift and turn it into something greater. It started with two people who chose love over hate, hope over despair, and a shared future over a divided past. And from that small beginning, an entire world was transformed.